I never thought one night would change my whole life, but when those bandits dragged me into the dark, I prayed for a miracle. He appeared out of nowhere, a stranger with fire in his eyes and steel in his hands. Don't scroll away, stay with me till the end, because what happened next will leave you breathless. My name is Anna. I was just an ordinary girl walking home, and that night turned into the most terrifying and unforgettable moment of my life. They shoved me into an old barn on the edge of the forest, their laughter echoing as they tied my hands and mocked me. I could smell the smoke of their campfire and hear them arguing about what to do with me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I had no hope left until suddenly the wooden door creaked open and a figure stepped inside. He wasn't one of them, I could tell immediately. Tall, broad shoulders, a stranger with a scar across his cheek and a calm but dangerous look in his eyes. The bandits turned, knives already drawn, but he didn't flinch. He just said in a low voice, "Let her go," and the way he said it froze them for a second. Like even they knew he wasn't someone to play with, and that was the moment I realized my miracle had come. The tallest bandit snarled and lunged at him with a rusty blade, but the stranger moved faster than I could even follow. One swift strike and the man collapsed, the others cursed and charged, the barn filled with chaos, fists slamming against wood, steel flashing in the dim light. I pressed myself against the corner, trembling, watching this storm of violence unfold. He fought like he had done this 100 times before, precise, brutal, unstoppable. One by one they fell until silence returned. Only his heavy breathing and my racing heartbeat remained. Then he turned toward me, his hands rough yet careful as he cut the ropes binding me. "You're safe now," he whispered, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. My knees gave out the moment the ropes fell away, but he caught me before I hit the dirt, lifting me as if I weighed nothing, his shirt damp with sweat and streaked with dust, the faint scar across his jaw catching the dim glow of the lantern. I clung to him, my whole body shaking from the fear that hadn't yet left me. Outside, the night air rushed against us as he carried me past the bodies of the men who had stolen my freedom. I couldn't even look at them. I buried my face against his chest, his heartbeat steady and strong, each step pulling me farther from the nightmare. "Who are you?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice hoarse and broken, but he only gave me a faint, almost tired smile. "No one important, just someone who couldn't let them keep you." And with those words I realized I owed my life to a man whose name I didn't even know. He set me down by the edge of the trees where the moonlight spilled silver across the clearing, my wrists still raw from the ropes, his rough hands brushing over them with surprising gentleness. He tore a strip from his own shirt and wrapped them as if it mattered more than his bleeding knuckles. I wanted to ask him why he risked everything for me, but the way his eyes scanned the darkness told me danger wasn't gone yet. "They had friends," he muttered, his hand moving to the revolver at his belt, the weight of it steady and certain. "We have to keep moving." I swallowed the knot of fear in my throat, forcing my legs to carry me even though they trembled. He stayed close, his presence like a wall between me and the shadows, each step echoing with the truth I couldn't ignore. My life no longer belonged to me alone. It was tied to this stranger who came out of nowhere, who fought and bled without asking for thanks. And as the forest closed around us, I realized I wasn't just walking beside a man, I was walking with the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. The night seemed endless, branches scraping at my arms as he led me deeper into the woods, his grip firm around my hand as if letting go wasn't an option. I could hear the shouts of the bandits behind us fading but never fully disappearing. Like wolves tracking their prey, he pulled me down a slope toward a narrow stream. The water glimmered faintly and he motioned for silence, crouching low, his chest heaving as he studied the tracks behind us. I could see the sweat clinging to his temples, his jaw set tight with determination. "They won't stop until one of us is dead," he whispered, the words both terrifying and strangely comforting, because in them I heard his promise, he wouldn't let it be me. And when he looked at me in that fleeting moment, eyes fierce and unyielding, I felt a spark of safety I hadn't known. In days of captivity, like he carried not just his own strength but mine too, and as the cold water of the stream numbed my feet, I knew I would follow him anywhere, even if the night never ended. He guided me along the stream, moving swiftly but with such caution that every snapped twig made my heart leap. His hand never left mine, and though the forest was thick and shadows pressed from all sides, there was something in the way he walked, as if he knew every route, every hidden path, that made me trust him blindly. Behind us the bandits cursed and stumbled, their lanterns flickering through the trees like dying stars, but he seemed to anticipate their every move, pulling me aside just before their lights drew too near, pressing me close against his chest, his breath warm on my hair as we waited in silence, my heart pounding against him, louder than the footsteps hunting us. Then, without a word, he lifted me as though I weighed nothing and carried me across a fallen log over the rushing water, his strength effortless, his determination unbreakable, and in that moment I realized he wasn't just a stranger who had saved me, he was the only reason I was still alive, and the only hope I had left. We didn't stop until the night thinned into pale dawn, the mist rising from the forest floor like ghosts of the chase, his arms steady around me whenever I stumbled, his voice low and firm whenever panic threatened to break me. And though exhaustion burned my body, I clung to his presence like it was the only real thing in a world gone mad. When we finally paused on a ridge, I looked back and saw nothing but endless trees stretching into silence, no torches, no shouts, only the distant echo of my own fear. He turned to me then, his eyes catching the first light of morning, hard yet strangely gentle, as if he carried more battles in his soul than I could ever imagine. And he said only one thing, that I was safe now, that he wouldn't let them touch me again, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of the blade at his side, his other hand brushing a strand of dirt and hair from my face, and in that fragile instant I felt the weight of everything fall away, replaced by something I couldn't name but knew would bind me to him forever. But even as his words settled inside me like a fragile promise, the forest whispered another truth, every rustle in the underbrush sounding like boots, every crack of a twig reminding me that danger doesn't die in a single night. I wanted to believe him, to melt into the safety of his arms and forget the shadows that had caged me, yet his gaze, sharp, watchful, always scanning the treeline, told me he trusted nothing, not even the silence. He led me down a narrow path hidden beneath roots and moss, a way only someone like him could know, and though my legs shook and my throat ached with thirst, I followed without question, because when his hand brushed mine in the half-light, I felt that strange, unspoken bond tighten between us, as though fate itself had tied me to the stranger who had torn me from the jaws of cruelty, and in that bond there was both salvation and a danger I could not yet name. The deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to close in, the air thick with damp earth and resin, shadows playing tricks on my tired eyes, yet his stride was steady, unyielding, as if he had walked these paths 100 times before. I wanted to ask who he really was, what kind of man could cut down armed bandits and vanish into the trees like a ghost, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just listened to the rhythm of his steps and the low rasp of his breath, and somehow it calmed me. When we reached a clearing bathed in the pale light of dawn, I saw a small cabin tucked beneath leaning pines, smoke rising faintly from the chimney as if it had been waiting for us. He stopped, finally letting his shoulders relax, and turned to me, his eyes softer now but still carrying the weight of everything he had seen. "You're safe here," he said quietly. And though my body trembled with exhaustion, my heart raced for a different reason, because for the first time since my capture I felt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore inside the cabin. The smell of wood smoke and dried herbs wrapped around me like a blanket. He set me down on a rough-hewn chair and lit a lantern, its glow pushing back the darkness. I studied his face in the flicker of the flame, a scarred, weathered, eyes sharp yet tired, the kind of man who had lived 100 battles but never spoken of them. He moved with quiet efficiency, bringing me water, tearing cloth to bind my wrists where the ropes had cut too deep. I whispered a thank you, but he only nodded as if words were unnecessary. Outside a wolf howled and I flinched, His hand rested on my shoulder for a moment, firm, steady, grounding me in the present. I realized then that the bandits hadn't just stolen my freedom, they had stolen my sense of safety. And somehow this stranger had given it back in a single night, yet something in his silence told me his story was far darker than mine. And though fear still coiled inside me, I knew I couldn't leave, not yet. Because the man who had saved me was also the mystery I needed to unravel. The storm outside raged louder, rain hammering the roof and wind rattling the shutters, yet in that small cabin time seemed to slow. He crouched near the fire, tossing in another log, sparks rising like tiny stars. I watched his profile, the sharp jawline, the way his eyes stayed fixed on the flames as though haunted by things only he could see. Finally I found the courage to ask his name, my voice trembling more than I wanted, but he didn't answer. Instead he handed me a bowl of broth, hot and fragrant, his silence both unsettling and strangely protective. I sipped slowly, feeling warmth spread through me, realizing how long I'd been cold. When our eyes met again there was something unspoken between us, a warning maybe, or a promise, I couldn't tell. But deep inside I knew the bandits wouldn't give up so easily, and that this man, this stranger, was the only one standing between me and whatever darkness still hunted in the woods. Wanted to ask why he had risked himself for me, why a stranger would step into the jaws of danger, but the words stuck in my throat as thunder shook the cabin and his hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt. Even in safety he remained ready, like a wolf guarding its den. He finally spoke, his voice low, rough as gravel yet steady. "They'll be back, and stronger." The words made my stomach twist, but the calm in his tone lit a spark of courage inside me. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was alive, breathing, and sitting across from the man who had given me that chance. The firelight danced over his scarred hands and weary eyes, and I realized those scars weren't just from battles with men, but with life itself. I whispered my name to him, almost like an offering, and though he gave no smile, just a small nod, I felt the world tilt, as if my fate had already tied itself to his. The silence between us stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the storm outside. I watched him sharpen his blade with slow, steady strokes, each rasp of metal on stone carrying the weight of 1,000 nights like this one. I wanted to ask who he was, where he came from, but I could sense that questions weren't welcomed. Instead I just whispered, "Why me?" And his eyes finally lifted to mine, dark and unreadable. "Because I was there," he said simply, as if that was enough. And maybe it was, because in that moment I realized he wasn't a savior chasing glory, he was a man who couldn't turn away, even if it meant bleeding for a stranger. And that truth settled in my chest like a brand, burning away the fear that had chained me for so long. I stared at him, the weight of his words pressing deeper than the cold air around us. He didn't boast, didn't expect gratitude. His voice carried a quiet finality that told me he had lived through worse and carried scars I couldn't yet see. The firelight flickered across his face, carving shadows that made him look both fierce and tired. I wanted to speak, to thank him, but my throat tightened. Instead I reached closer to the flames, letting the warmth spread through my trembling hands. He noticed. Without a word he pulled his coat from his shoulders and draped it over me. The rough fabric smelled of smoke and pine. My heart pounded, not from fear anymore but from something harder to name. In that silence between the storm and the fire, I realized I was no longer a prisoner. I was free, yet somehow bound again. This time to the stranger who had risked everything to pull me from the darkness. He leaned back against the log, eyes fixed on the flames, and for the first time since the bandits had dragged me away I felt a strange kind of safety. I studied the outline of his face, the sharp jaw, the scar that traced down his cheek. He seemed carved from stone, yet there was softness in the way he shifted the coat tighter around me. I whispered a shaky, "Why did you do it?" my voice barely rising above the crackle of the fire. His eyes flicked toward me, steel meeting my fear. "Because no one else would," he said simply, as if that answer explained everything. I wanted to press further, to know who he was, where he came from, but his silence told me he lived in shadows, perhaps always had, still I couldn't stop myself. "What's your name?" I asked. And after a long pause, he gave me only one word, low and steady, a name that felt heavier than the night itself, and I knew that whoever he was, my life was now forever tied to his. That name echoed in my head as I watched the firelight dance across his features. I tried to memorize every detail, afraid he would vanish with the dawn like a dream. He tore a piece of bread in half and handed it to me without a word, his hand rough, scarred. The kind of hand that had held weapons more often than comfort, yet when it brushed mine, I felt warmth instead of fear. I chewed slowly, eyes never leaving him, searching for answers he wasn't willing to give. "They'll come after us," I whispered, dread sinking back into my chest. He nodded once, calm as if he had expected it all along. "Then we'll be ready," he said, and the way he said we made my heart thump harder. In that single word I realized I was no longer alone, that this stranger who had cut me free from darkness was now my shield, and maybe, just maybe, my fate. The night pressed heavy, but sitting across from him I felt safer than I had in months. His eyes burned with a quiet determination, like a man who had lost everything before and refused to lose again. I wanted to ask why he had risked himself for me, why he had come into that den of wolves with nothing but steel and fire in his gaze. But instead I whispered, "What happens when the sun rises?" His jaw tightened, a muscle flickering as if the question carried too many memories. "Then we move," he said, simple, certain, final. I felt the fear that had haunted me begin to crack, replaced by a strange kind of hope. I didn't even know his name, yet my soul clung to him like it had found its anchor, and in that moment, under the vast indifferent stars, I realized my life was no longer mine alone. It was tied to his, bound by blood spilled and chains broken. At dawn the world seemed sharper, the air cold enough to sting my lungs as we walked through the trees. He moved ahead of me, every step careful, listening for danger. I followed, clutching the blanket he had thrown over my shoulders, still feeling the tremor in my legs from all those nights locked away. He didn't speak much, only glanced back to make sure I was there. But in those glances I saw more than words could carry. I saw a promise, one I hadn't dared to dream of when the bandits dragged me into the dark, a promise that I would not be left behind again. And though I didn't even know where he was leading me, for the first time in so long I let myself believe there was a place waiting beyond the forest where I could be free. We reached a ridge where the trees thinned and sunlight spilled across the valley. The warmth felt unreal after days of damp shadows. He stopped there, scanning the land below as if weighing every possibility. His hand rested on the hilt of his revolver and I realized he was still protecting me even in silence. I wanted to thank him but the words tangled in my throat. All I managed was to step closer, close enough that if I stumbled he could catch me. He didn't move away. Instead he let out a slow breath and finally spoke, his voice low and steady, telling me that beyond those hills was a small town, safe enough for me to start over. He said he would take me there if I wished, but only if I was ready, and in that moment I felt a surge of something I had lost long ago. Choice, the power to decide my own path, and it made my chest tighten with both fear and hope. I looked at him, this stranger who had fought off my captors as if my life mattered more than his own, and I wondered why he cared. His face was rough, marked by lines of dust and battle, but his eyes held a kind of patience I hadn't seen in years. I asked him why he didn't just leave me when he had the chance. His jaw tensed as though he wasn't used to explaining himself. Then he said he had once lost someone because he came too late, and he swore never again to walk past someone in need. My heart pounded because for the first time I felt seen, not as a prisoner or a burden but as a person worth saving. The wind stirred the grass around us and I realized I wasn't trembling anymore. Not from fear at least, but from the strange warmth of knowing I wasn't alone. We walked away from the camp slowly, my legs weak but his steady presence guiding me. I could still hear the shouts of the bandits behind us but he didn't look back. His hand brushed mine every so often, firm and grounding, like he was reminding me that I was safe now. I asked his name and he paused before answering, as if he wasn't used to giving it. he told me simply, "Call me Jack." And for some reason that name felt like a shield. I clung to it in my mind as though it could ward off the terror of the past days. When we reached the river, he stopped to let me drink, kneeling beside me so I wouldn't fall, his eyes scanning the horizon with that same fierce determination. And in that moment I realized he wasn't just rescuing me, he was teaching me how to breathe again. We followed the river downstream until the sun began to sink behind the hills, painting the sky with streaks of fire. Jack found a hidden path through the reeds and led me to an old cabin, half forgotten and leaning against the trees. Inside it smelled of dust and pine, but it was shelter. He lit a small fire, his rough hands surprisingly gentle as he placed a blanket around my shoulders. I watched the flames dance and felt warmth returning to my body. He didn't speak much, just kept glancing toward the door like a sentinel. Yet when his eyes met mine for longer than a moment, I saw something fierce soften there, something that told me he hadn't just risked his life out of duty, he had chosen to, and that choice bound us together in a way I could barely understand. He sat across from me, the firelight carving shadows on his face, his jaw tight as if he was fighting with words he didn't want to say. I pulled the blanket tighter, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver, it was the way his eyes lingered on me, heavy, unrelenting, like he was holding me in place without moving a muscle. When I whispered a quiet "thank you," he leaned closer, his voice low and rough, saying I had no idea what danger I'd been saved from. His hand brushed against mine only for a second, but it felt like a spark leapt through me. My heart raced faster than it had when the bandits held me. And suddenly the silence between us was louder than any scream from before, charged, dangerous, and impossible to escape. His gaze didn't break, it only grew darker, and I felt my breath catch as if the air itself had thickened. He moved a little closer, the fire flickering against the hard lines of his face, and for the first time I noticed the faint scar along his jaw, a reminder of battles he must have fought long before me. His voice dropped lower, almost a growl, telling me that I wasn't safe yet. That the men who took me had friends, that they would come looking, but the way his eyes traveled over me betrayed something else, something far from just protection. I swallowed hard, torn between fear and the strange pull that kept me rooted near him. When his rough hand finally closed over mine, I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just let the moment burn through me like the fire at our side, knowing that something had changed forever. He didn't let go, his calloused fingers brushing over my skin with a strange gentleness that didn't match his hardened look, and I felt my pulse racing faster with every second. He leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my ear as he told me I should rest, but the way his hand lingered said he wanted me to do anything but sleep. My heart pounded so loud I thought he could hear it. I couldn't look away from his eyes, those stormy eyes that seemed to strip away every layer of fear and hesitation inside me. The night around us was quiet except for the crackle of fire, yet inside me everything screamed. I wanted to step back, but instead I found myself moving closer, almost without thought, as if his presence commanded me. As if danger wasn't outside in the woods anymore, but right here between us. His rough palm slid from my arm to my waist, pulling me closer until my chest pressed against the firm line of his body. I gasped softly, but he only smirked, his voice low and husky as he whispered that I didn't need to fear him, that the only thing I should fear was how much I'd crave what he could give me. His thumb traced lazy circles on my hip, sending shivers all over me. My lips parted but no words came out. He tilted his head, his stubble brushing my cheek, and then his mouth hovered just a breath away from mine, the firelight flickering in his eyes. I felt like the world had stopped. My thoughts melted into a haze of heat and anticipation, and when his lips finally caught mine, it wasn't gentle, it was demanding, hungry, as if he had been waiting forever for this moment and had no intention of letting me go. His kiss grew deeper, his tongue sliding against mine with a raw hunger that stole my breath, his hand tangled in my hair, pulling my head back just enough for his mouth to travel down my neck, each hot kiss making me arch closer against him, my fingers clutching his shirt as if I'd drown without holding on. The danger of what had just happened with the bandits still lingered in the air, but in his arms it all melted away, replaced by a feverish rush I couldn't resist. His voice broke through the haze, low and rough against my skin, saying I belonged to him now, that he wouldn't let anyone else touch me, and when he lifted me effortlessly into his arms, carrying me away from the shadows into the glow of the fire, I knew there was no turning back, that I was already lost to the stranger who had saved me and now claimed me completely. He laid me down gently, yet the fire in his eyes promised nothing gentle would follow, his weight pressing against me as his lips crashed onto mine again, tasting of danger and desire, his rough hands exploring as if he needed proof I was really there, really his every brush of his skin against mine sending shivers down my spine, my body responding before my mind could even catch up, and when he whispered my name like a vow, like a possession, I felt the world fall away until there was only us. The heat, the hunger, and the undeniable pull that tied me to the man who had saved me, a stranger no more but something far more dangerous, my savior, my captor, my everything in that wild, reckless moment. His breath grew hotter against my neck, each exhale fanning the flames already burning inside me. His hand slid lower, firm and demanding, claiming every inch of me as though he'd waited a lifetime for this moment. And I couldn't resist the way my body arched into his touch, surrendering to the strength that had ripped me from chains only to bind me in something even stronger. His voice a low growl as he told me I was safe now, but the way his mouth trailed over my skin told me safety was the last thing he intended to give me. Instead there was only the rush of forbidden ecstasy. The storm of need crashing through us with no escape, no hesitation, just the inevitability of two souls colliding in the dark. His lips found mine with a hunger that stole the very breath from my chest, his hands gripping my waist as if he feared I might vanish back into the shadows, and I clung to him just as desperately, every shiver of my body answering the fierce command in his touch. The raw strength of the man who had fought through danger now turning into something far more primal, his mouth moving with ruthless precision, tasting, devouring, leaving me trembling and gasping, my mind screaming that I should pull away but my body betraying me, melting against him as if it had always belonged there, as though fate itself had delivered me not to a savior but to a storm I could never hope to escape. His grip tightened as he lifted me effortlessly, pressing my back against the rough bark of a tree, the contrast of its bite against my skin making me gasp while his body pressed harder into mine, his breath hot against my ear as he whispered words I couldn't even process, only the low growl of his voice sending waves through me, his hands exploring as though he had every right, and I found myself arching toward him, chasing that dangerous closeness, that forbidden fire, until nothing existed but the fierce pounding of his heart against my chest and the dizzying certainty that I was lost in him completely. His mouth found mine in a sudden, hungry kiss that stole the air from my lungs, his hand sliding firmly down my side, claiming me as if the forest itself had given me over to him, and I clung to his shoulders, trembling not from fear but from the wild heat flooding through me, each movement more demanding, more undeniable, until the world blurred away and there was only the raw, burning pull between us that left me powerless to resist. His lips didn't leave mine, only deepened the kiss until I thought I would lose myself entirely. His rough hand moved lower, gripping my hip as though anchoring me in place while his chest pressed tight against me, and the heat of him made my head spin, his breath ragged, his voice breaking through in a husky whisper that I barely understood but felt with every nerve in my body. And as he pulled me even closer I could feel his strength, the unyielding power of a man who had lived his whole life in the wild, and it terrified me as much as it thrilled me, my fingers digging into his shirt while my body gave way to him, trembling, needy, overwhelmed, every second stretching out until I wasn't sure if I was standing on the forest floor anymore or floating in a storm he had created. And in that storm there was no escape, only the sweet, dangerous surrender I had never known before. His mouth trailed lower, brushing along my neck with a burning softness that sent shivers racing down my spine, his stubble scraping gently against my skin as though marking me with every movement, and I couldn't stop the sound that slipped past my lips. A mix of fear and yearning, my knees weakening beneath me as his arm tightened around my waist to keep me steady, his breath hot against my collarbone, every touch deliberate, every pause unbearable, as though he wanted me to feel how completely he owned this moment, how powerless I was beneath his presence, yet my hands betrayed me, clutching him tighter instead of pushing him away, my heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst. And in that instant I realized there was no turning back. I was his, claimed by a stranger who had saved me and now held me captive in a way chains never could. His lips finally met mine with a hunger that stole the breath from my chest. The world outside vanished, and all that remained was the heat of his body pressing into mine, the roughness of his hands roaming as though he had every right, and I let him. My own body betraying every thought of resistance, melting against him as if I had been waiting for this moment my entire life, the night swallowing our voices, my heart whispering a truth I never dared to admit. I didn't just want to be saved, I wanted to be taken, completely, entirely, and he knew it, because when his eyes locked with mine in the dark, I saw the promise there, dangerous and irresistible. I was his now, and nothing could change it.